And it's the first piece of advice I ever give to somebody who wants to do this for a living, or you ever get into content creation, have really shitty jobs first.
Welcome to the 2% Factor podcast, where we explore small things that make a massive difference in someone's story, someone's journey. Joining us today, we have Mari Takahashi. Welcome, Mari.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
Happy to have you today. Other folks may know her as AtomicMari. Mari's very well known as a YouTuber, award-winning host, actress, professional dancer. Mari has a massive impact on the gaming industry as well, and she's co-owner of Space Station Gaming and an esports organization. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Gosh,
Yeah,
I hope I live up to that bio.
I know. It's funny when when we were writing it, I thought, gosh, it's such an awesome background. I am so excited to have you as a guest today because I think there's so much for people to hear as we break down your story and your 2% factor moments, for people to learn, what really happened along the way for you, and to hear some reflection about some of those key moments in your life.
I like it. We're getting deep.
Very cool. Getting deep, getting deep. Well, let's do this. I think I want to get into Smosh. But before we get into Smosh, I'd like to start back in to things that happened in your life before Smosh. You know what I mean?
Sure
Like,
thing.
yeah. So,
How long do you want to go back? How far back are we going
I
in the
mean,
time
let's
machine?
let's let's go for it. Let's go back to where it mattered to you, right? Let's go back to where, from your perspective, some key moments in your life that ended up shaping, I'll call it pre-Smosh.
Okay. Yeah. So Smosh and on the timeline happened in 2010. Before 2010, I started ballet as a second generation ballerina, as in my mom was a ballerina, and a teacher. And so I started when I was 2.5 years old. And I
Wow.
was on track to be a ballerina for the rest of my life. I mean, I thought that I would dance ballet professionally till my knees broke, and then I would teach ballet until the day I died. That was kind of my destined sort of life track. And so my entire childhood was shaped around how do I get to become a professional ballerina.
Why ballet? Was that because of the influence through the generations of this? Okay. All right. So it
Yeah,
was
a
like, hey,
hundred
this is
percent.
this is what we do. This is what we want to teach our daughter, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was a track that I was placed on in very, very early childhood, to the point where I knew no other track. I think it was around third grade when I kind of started to rebel. I'm like, I want to do karate. I want to play soccer. I basically just want to like kick stuff. Um, and I started rebelling against wearing all the pink stuff, that was associated with ballet and princesses. I started dressing like my neighbor, who's a boy. And, it was just like my way of being like, I don't know how to find independence. And from there was a lot of kind of like strife in finding myself in what ballet was to me. Was it a thing that was handed to me in a way of like, this is what your life is going to be, or did I at some point choose it? So I think most of my adolescence was that. And then at 17, I went professional.
Professional ballet.
Yeah.
So was this conflict that you had, that you were testing boundaries and getting involved with martial arts, and dressing differently and pushing back on classic ballet colors? What was that like for like 10 years? Like that was kind of like a whole thing through like primary, middle school into high school kind of thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But most of the fight was happening in my own head.
Yeah.
I wanted to do soccer. I wanted to do martial arts. But I was never able to because all of my time was spent on ballet. I mean, I was on contract at age 3 to 10, touring nationally for the Nutcracker during those times. So I would take
Wow.
a month off of school during those times. And so, I mean, I was a working kid from a
Yeah.
very early age. I knew what
That's
it meant to have a contract and fulfill it.
that's insane, but it does there's probably so much there for you, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
when you go back to what it kind of reminds me of like Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, right? Like in order to be that good, you had to put, everything into it, all so many hours after hours in order to even get a contract for the Nutcracker. I mean, the Nutcracker is a big deal.
I've never done the math, but I wonder if I hit 10,000 hours before I hit 17 when I went professional. One of these days I will do the math,
Yeah, let me
but
know.
yeah, it was just the ballet studio was my home away from home. And so I think that those internal struggles were always there, but in a lot of ways, I think that it made me more introspective. I think it made me hold on to a discipline that I don't know if I would have done so if it was not something that was expected out of me. You
Yeah.
know, if I was on my own track and I said, "Oh, I want to do martial arts," I'll do that for 6 months. Now I want to do soccer, I'll do it for 2 weeks. Now I want to do something else. I don't know. You know, it is something that I ask myself: was I trained to be disciplined, or was it already inherently in me?
Well, that's a good question. Do you think discipline can be trained?
I think if it is intentional, yes. And I think every self-help book out there tells you that you can. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it is exponentially harder as an adult
Hmm.
to do that unless you have coaches and, mentors around you all the time. But I think that I learned it early because I had that really, really early on. It was
Yeah.
my mom who was both my mom and my coach, sometimes not really knowing the difference, which one was which. And I'm like, who am I going to get right now? Is it going to be mom or coach?
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Right. Which hat
Yeah,
are they wearing today?
exactly. Most of the
Yeah.
times it's both.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I am now I can look back and be very grateful for everything that I learned from ballet. I don't think that I would have the same type of mindset going into content creation and YouTube and everything that comes with all of the digital media stuff because it's really big now.
Yeah.
But when I started in 2010, it wasn't. Um, it was this really weird fringe thing to tell people like, "Oh yeah, I make YouTube videos and I put it up online for people to see." Back then, people were like, "All right, that's weird. What do you do for
Yeah.
your real job?"
Yeah. Well, I even think today a lot of people don't get it. And then you find out that, Aiden Ross makes more money on salary than LeBron James.
Yeah, it is bananas. And I think, what is the thing that validates this work as legitimate? Is it the money? Is it the fame? Is it the art that is produced out of it? I don't know. I think there's very, very different measurements of it, but I think as soon as people saw money and fame, they were like, "Oh, okay, I guess this is a legitimate life path." But
Yeah.
I think that there is a lot more that goes into it that is overshadowed by people's desire to just want to be in the limelight. I think that it's replaced what people used to say when they were, I don't know, maybe like 30 years ago, when it's like, what do you want to be? And, if you say, I want to be an actor, most people aren't saying, I want to learn the craft of acting. Most
Right.
people are saying, I want to be a celebrity. And I think that's what they see with YouTube and digital content creation right now.
God, that's really interesting. Do you think that has this created like a new place for creatives? You know what I mean? Like if you think about years ago before the platform opportunities were out there, it was, I want to be an artist? Do I want to be an actor? Like how do you get that side of your personality and your brain and your heart out? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I think that it's absolutely made a new platform for it. And it's also made a new platform for kind of the, I don't know, I don't know what the equivalency of like pranksters and, sensationalist sort of um content creators are, but maybe it's, like the Jerry Springers, like I don't know. I think there's all facets of of entertainment. There's Oscar winning movies and there's Jerry Seinfeld on, not Jerry Seinfeld,
Jerry Springer. Yeah.
Jerry Springer on the other end. And I think that it's reflective of that now. It's just you've taken out the middleman of agencies and producers and directors and studios saying, "Oh, you are worthy or not worthy of being part of this club." It's anyone can do it, and in some ways that's very aspirational, and then in other ways it's like, whoa, do are we good with not vetting anyone? This is pretty bonkers if you think about it. So
It is such, but the way you're explaining this is a way that I've never heard it explained before. I think it's really cool. You're saying there's space for everybody, right? I mean, good or bad, and whether your definition is good, someone else's definition is bad, right? Is it okay? Okay, is it not okay? It's a place for some freedom of expression, if you will, without the level of constraints and oversight that has historically been there.
I think that it is pushing what humans thought that they desired to like watch all the time. And I think it's pushing people to find ways to kind of rehash things that have always been there. My husband always watches this Canadian van life guy, and he lives out of his van. He goes to these beautiful places in Canada, and every day he just does these beautiful cinematic shots of making a cup of coffee, petting his dog, and then he says something really like positive in a very quiet tone, and he goes, and he ends it with something like, goodbye, buddy," something like that. And I'm like, I don't know why any of us needed this like good morning bedtime story strange thing, but I don't know, it soothes the soul. And I don't know if there used to be these little pockets that are super hyper niche available to people.
God, so true. I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm actually surprised when I see some channels that are super popular, and I'll see something on there and be like, okay, there's 25 million people that are into that. Whatever that is, whether it's goofy comedy or whatever. But yeah, I don't know how we got that need served in the past. You know what I mean? Whether it was before the availability was out there, but I do think it's um, an opportunity for people to create. You know what I mean?
I
And
agree.
and then and then
I
it's
agree.
almost like this like free market approach. If people are into it, they're into it, and if they're not, then you're not going to be watched.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how it was served before. It wasn't too long ago where everyone kind of watched the same thing on a Friday night, or what we heard on the radio was what everyone heard on the radio. I think when we started niching out music interests by the way of like Pandora and Spotify, and maybe even before that, uh, and kind of really skewing it to like, what do you like? It started to really change us. And who knows which one is better, Like in some ways, what are the moments that we get to all relish in the same thing at the same time anymore? A new series drops, it's The Mandalorian. Everyone's excited about it, but some people are going to watch it 2 weeks from now, and some people are going to watch it, a year from now because families and kids
Right.
and work and whatever it is. I mean, sports might be kind of like the only sort of things that everyone is tuned in on.
Right. That kind of live event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Natural disasters? I'm not really sure. It's like I guess the pandemic was something that everyone came together and was like literally everyone was affected by, and that may be the last sort of, hopefully the very last thing in all of our lifetimes that we go through that we're like everyone is part of this. no matter where you are. And feeling that sort of unity in a singular thing.
I think you touch on a really interesting point. Where do you think community and kind of the need for community plays into interest in, people that follow you? You have a community. You have a community of over 750,000 followers on Instagram, right? And your different outlets that you create. Where does community play into this whole thing?
That's everything. I mean, I sincerely wouldn't be here if there wasn't a community that was already built in when I started. Going back to Smosh, it was the equivalency of saying yes to a Craigslist ad. That is how I started with Smosh.
That's incredible. So
And
tell us about that. Let's get into that. So
okay,
and
and
help us
we'll circle back into community.
yeah, let's do it. And then help us understand the transition from ballet to Smosh.
So in 2010, I was kind of at my I would say a turning point in my ballet career. I had been dancing for a while now, almost hitting a decade as a professional dancer. I would have things in my contract like you can't do extreme sports, you can't go scuba diving, you can't go skydiving, things like this. And I was just getting to a limit where I'm like, am I really living my life? I have no idea. I'm nearing 25 years old and I don't know if I'm actually living my life. And so I started to have little moments of rebellion again. And one of those things just happened to be like climbing mountains and going after things that I normally wouldn't do. We would have 2 months during the summer where our contract would not be fulfilled. And so during those 2 months, all of us ballerinas would just scramble for work. And I would take anything. I used to be a magician's assistant. I would do birthday parties in my ballet tutu and go in as the ballerina. So I would take anything for those 2 months. And I saw an ad on a website called SF Casting, which is San Francisco Casting, kind of like a Craigslist for entertainers. And there was an ad saying we need somebody who speaks Japanese and English to do a web series sketch comedy. And I was like, okay, cool. It's $50. Dope. It's awesome.
Perfect. Yeah.
Sign me up. Yeah. And it was just a one-off. And I go to this thing and it's Ian and Anthony. I don't know who they are. So we just kind of like get along and
meaning Ian and Anthony, the owners of Smosh, the creators.
Yes. Okay. Sorry for those who did not grow up in the internet era. They're kind of considered the grandfathers of YouTube. They started back in 2005. They were the first channel to kind of go viral.
Yeah, they were pioneers in the YouTube space.
Oh yeah. I don't think that there will be a history book about YouTube and internet culture without their names being part of it. They kind of started the idea that a YouTube channel can become an empire. It could become something like a television channel. And so very, very early on, they kind of started to figure out what that could look like, with a mixture of sketch comedy and a lot of internet humor, gaming humor, and things like that.
Which is, by the way, crazy for that time.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
it was a sensation.
Such a small percentage of people who even understand what that was, and the possibility to monetize at a much bigger level than just simple things like YouTube ads and things like that. I mean, really a big empire vision for what this could be.
I mean, you bring up a really good point of back then there was no roadmap. This was true early adopters mentality where it was still seen as this, I don't know, it was the Wild West, but it was the Wild West without understanding that there was even a West. I mean, they really started because the reason why they put anything up on YouTube is a great story as well. Anthony had a website, and suddenly couldn't host videos because it would cost too much money, and they wanted to share a video that the two of them made with their friends and their families, because that's the only people who would be watching at that point.
Right.
And they put it up on YouTube and it started to blow up. But back then, the numbers were just so, there's nothing to match it towards. There was no real understanding of, is it important? Is it interesting? It would
Yeah,
be news for a second.
there's no baseline, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were creating that baseline, and most people on YouTube were. But I think that's kind of the magic of Generation 1 creators like that, where it was just an outlet to put their art on, and there wasn't this thought of, can I become famous off of this? Can I become rich off of this? Can I become somebody known? Is there a celebrity part of it? I think nowadays that's kind of the first thing that people see.
Sure.
Could this be a career for me? And back then, it just used to be, this is just what I made, and I want to share it with the few people in my life. And so I think it came from I don't want to say a wholesome place. I think it just came from a different place, a place that wasn't a business mindset by any means. It just came from a place of necessity at the time.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So that's how we started. So talk about a 2% factor moment. I mean, when you responded to that ad and met the owners of Smosh in the early days, so what happened from there?
Yeah, the 2% factor there it's still something that I live by now, is show up and don't be an asshole. And it's like,
I like it.
And showing up can mean a lot of things, right? It's showing up physically and just kind of understanding that any opportunity could become an opportunity, or it might just be a fluke, or it just might be a flop. You never really know. You don't go in there with expectations, but it is important to take what little opportunities there are, even if they seem like a nothing burger. And showing up can also mean like bringing your whole self on the day. Bring your full capacity of what you can bring to the table, for yourself and for the other people around you. And I think not being an asshole is, I don't know if it's hard, but I think it's easy.
I think it's hard for some people.
I don't know, but I don't know if that's a muscle you can work in or out, but it takes some introspection, I guess. But I think that is the mindset that I went with it back then, and it is still a mindset that I use now.
That's really good advice.
But okay, so I meet Ian and Anthony. We just kind of get along. We shoot the shit. Sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to swear on here.
Yeah, of course we are. Swear away.
Okay. And yeah, I think the first conversation I had with Ian on set was like about cars, because he had a Subaru and that was like my dream car. And so we just were professional and we just had a fun time. And then they asked if I wanted to come back for a recurring role. Had no idea what that meant. And I said, sure, I'll audition for it. And that audition got plastered on the internet, and they said, vote for the person you want, because it was myself and I think maybe 5 other people who were going for this co-host position. And, I mean, it's internet back then. It's not a real audition. It's not a real job. You're not sending in a resume by any means.
Yeah,
it
doesn't feel like a classic job interview.
No. I remember being pretty perturbed because I thought it was going to be a classic job interview. And then it turned out to be them on one side of the room with a dinky camera, me on the other side, and them asking me questions like, what are the 3 things that you would bring to a zombie apocalypse? And I'm like, I thought we were going to talk about the integrity of my work today.
So what did they have you do? It was just random questions and seeing how you react to get your personality out there, or what happened?
Exactly that. It was like, do you have any stupid human tricks? What's the weirdest thing you've eaten before? It was really just to get your personality out there. And the strangest thing is that because I was looking for, and this is probably me being a pretentious ballerina, but because I was looking for this, regular job interview or a traditional audition, I think I was rather aloof for the entire thing, and I was answering questions in a pretty laid back manner, and their audience loved it. Their audience was like, "She
Wow.
doesn't look like she's trying hard," blah blah blah, and they loved it. And so it's strange because I'm like, huh, that's what you guys like. But
So, so what you want me to do is not work that hard, just kind of hang back and be relaxed and be myself. Oh, okay. Which is probably
it's
the
strange.
opposite of what you're dealing with, before that.
100%,
Hmm.
100%. Yeah, it was really interesting. But I think that I approached it from a place of like more confusion than anything, because I was like, okay, I'm really used to these stuffy auditions, and kind of like being putting on display like what are your abilities? And I think the thing about YouTube that really pulled this switch in my head was with ballet, it was always about the shell. It was all about my abilities physically. It was always about my body and its capabilities. And as soon as I was on YouTube and making my own content, for the first time, I felt like people were there not for my body, but for my intelligence, my wit, my humor, my personality. And that was something that I think it imbued something in me that I can never repay back to whatever this, YouTube thing is. It's something that going back to community, it was something that gave me, I don't know, a band-aid on a hole in my soul that I didn't know I needed. I was like, oh my gosh, you're here for me, not just what my body can do.
I love this. Hearing this, it's almost like before Smosh and that journey, it was people wanted you for what you could do. And then all of a sudden you started connecting people with people about who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that YouTube was my outlet as far as who I was watching back then. I was watching all Asian Americans or Asian Canadians. I was watching Asian people on YouTube.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize it for a long time, but it was my way of kind of patching the holes in my life of not knowing like where I stand in the world. Like I would watch Asian people on YouTube because I'm like, "Oh my gosh, they're the main character. They're not the silent side character that just does karate." I'm like, "They are telling their stories. They're humorous. They're you know they're the main stories that they get to capture and kind of pave that road with." And so I think as soon as I was on there, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a responsibility now. This is not what I was expecting.
Now you're thrust in this position where people are watching you and you're inspiring them as a main person.
Yeah. It was pretty late, I would say, in my content creation career that I realized that I had put myself in that position, because I was still watching the same people and being like, "Wow, man, they're awesome. They get to sort of carve out who they are in this world by just making the content about themselves and about like how they want to be seen in the world." And I think I was just kind of like throwing spaghetti at a wall for a long time. I'm like, well, I'm going to talk about fun stuff on the internet and things like this without really understanding how much of my own personality was kind of pouring out of me while doing so. And I'm really grateful, and just it still boggles my mind that I was able to inspire a generation of a lot of kids who are like, "Oh, I like nerd stuff and gaming and geek stuff and humor and kind of like mixing it all into a ball." And I think I still kind of am this dichotomous person where I'm like, I don't know how all these things stick together, but it's just a bunch of stuff.
I don't know how it works, but it works really well, right? That kind of thing. So what happened with like what catch us up on kind of that those early days of Smosh, right? And then how did it take off and what was that whole experience like?
Oh, it took off immediately. It was an overnight thing, but you know, I don't know if I would have approached it the same way today, but then my first solo video, I hit post on it. And to give you a barometer, this was back in 2011. And within a week, it hit 1 million views back in
Wow.
2011.
And this is
And
your very first post that hit 1 million views.
that was the very first post that I wrote, produced, hosted, directed. I was a one man show for that.
And but Mari, that's crazy, right? I mean, even if you think back to 2011, there was there was such a small group of viewers compared to now. Like to hit a
Yes.
million on your first post is like it's bigger than a home run. It's insane.
It was the numbers were so bonkers that I didn't really understand it, which I think in some ways was wonderful. I didn't like for me, I was like, whoa, that's a lot of like sold out theaters. But I think even then, you know, my brain was just still wrapped in like, I don't know what 1 million views on a digital platform means. I know what 1,200 people in seats look like in a theater.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think there was the disconnect was so real back then because I hit post and then I went rock climbing for 3 days with zero internet, and I just didn't. I completely disconnected from it, and it wasn't a planned thing where I'm like I'm gonna get away from it because I don't know what the what people are going to say or whatnot. It was
Right.
more of a, well, that work is done. I've bowed, curtains have closed. I'm on to the next thing. The next thing right now is rock climbing. Um, and so I think I saw it as that rather than, okay, I did my work. Let's see what the reviewers are going to say.
Right.
It was, yeah, it was more just like and the show is done.
Yeah.
And so I went away from it. But here's the crazy part. I uploaded every Saturday for something like 300 weeks in a row. And for the first 6 months, the dislike bar was higher than the like bar.
Really?
The community hated it. And I mean, like 26,000 dislikes. It's a lot of dislikes, Dan, every single week. Every single week.
How did you deal with that? Because you kept posting.
I kept posting. So Ian and Anthony, who started this channel, they at not a single time were they like, all right, we need to rethink strategies, Mari. You know, the community, they're really talking and we got to figure it out. Maybe we got to let you go. Not a single time in all that time. They just said, just keep doing the work. They'll come around.
Why is that? Is that because they just knew the content was that good and everybody would start catching up to how good it is? Or like what was that about? How did they I don't want to say disregard that feedback, but push past that feedback to get to where you wanted to get to?
I don't know if they were uh it's almost like they knew the future or something. I think they trusted the process. I really do. And back then, like they were still young guys. They started when they were 17, 18 years old. They're in their mid 20s. For them to see that sort of long view of what it can be, blows my mind. I think that they were able to see that there was something there. And I remember back then they're like, you can train somebody to be a host, but you can't train charisma into somebody. And I was like,
Boy, that's true.
that's really it was an interesting thing. I don't know. Some people might argue that you can train charisma, but I think maybe in that time period they're like, well, we're not going to do it. So I
Yeah,
think they just
that could be a choice, right? Like, hey,
right.
maybe you could argue you could train it, but we're not going to train it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was more of that choice, but
How,
I
how did you, Maury, deal with the trust factor? Like, I mean, you're young, you're inexperienced in the YouTube world. You came from a super disciplined background of what you knew, and these dislikes can often tear people down, bring down their confidence. How did you deal with that and trust them that it's all going to be okay?
good gosh. I think that my I think, it was kind of a worldview back then where YouTube wasn't my whole entire world. And I think that very much helped. I was able to still see what real life was versus this digital sort of like finite numbers game. And I knew that my sort of personality was tied to ballet then. And so ballet was the thing where it was tangible to me. It was the thing where I'm like, well, I know 1,200 people at a sold out theater, and I know what it feels like to have my feet step down on a stage, do a really good job, take a bow, hear the thunderous claps, and then see the curtain close, and that is a show. I think that there was this disconnect of, I don't know what the heck 26,000 dislikes means. Does that look like 26,000 people going like this at me and booing me? I think that it was just this like big number. And back then you could see this red
Right.
bar. And it would be red bar, green bar. Um and so I think there was a kind of a disconnect of like not really understanding what that big number actually meant. And something that Anthony told me back then was don't feed the trolls. And it's kind of a funny thing to say, but at the end of the day, I think it really ties into everything that you read about of, whether it's The Secret or, self-help books or whatever it is. It's like the more you cultivate the positive comments, the more that will grow. And it is absolutely true.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
Um,
And so what you're tapping into right now, it's so interesting. I had dinner with a friend last night. He's a chef,
mm,
and we were talking about the podcast and 2% factor, and he was reflecting on his story. He owns several restaurants and has grown up and was a chef at the Ritz Carlton and then in a number of other Michelin star restaurants type of things. He's done it well. And I asked him, I said, when you look back young in your career, what's something that stands out to you that as a 2% factor moment that shapes what happened with you? And it's what you're talking about right here. He said, I had to know when to turn away from the bad news, right? He didn't feed
mm.
the trolls. And he told me the story about when he was, young in his career and working in a certain food station, and everybody was trying to take him down because they knew he was good. And he just got hazed by everybody, right? And he said, and it was a terrible job, but he knew what he was going to get out of it by the training he was getting and the environment he was in. He knew how he was growing. But he said the number one thing that I remember from that is I purposefully ignored and didn't let the trolls take me down. And it's funny, 30 years later, for him, that was one of the things that shaped his entire career is knowing when to disregard the no's and when to move forward with what the vision is.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's I don't know if it's a muscle. I don't know if what it is in our brains. And maybe through all of your conversations, you'll find out. But I think it's a human thing to, put a red flag on the negative comments and being like, I gotta deal with this. This is so much bigger. You can have 10 positive comments saying, this was great. I really enjoyed it. Love the thing. You're doing great. And one that says, this sucked. And it's like, I don't know what it must be a lizard brain thing where it's like, that one, we got to solve that one. All the good ones, it doesn't matter. But the bad one, we got to either solve it or kill it. Like I think that it is some lizard brain shit because it takes something in you to be like, I am making a choice to recognize that that is there and move away
Then
from
move
it.
on.
Yeah, like, but I think the more, I think this is something you can train in yourself.
I agree. I think it's a mindset that you condition yourself to making a choice on what to focus on.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I mean,
Yeah.
anyone on Twitter or X will tell you it's difficult to just really focus on the good stuff and like and not the negative and not talk back on the negative stuff because I think it's human to want to,
Yep.
but it goes back to really cultivating and sheesh, the community that was built around that. Whenever somebody was like, "Hey, I like this," I'm like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Can you tell me what you liked about it?" And the more the community understood that I have conversations with people who are leaving positive comments or things where it is creative or not creative, what is it when somebody's giving you like advice that's
Like constructive
positive?
feedback.
Constructive feedback. Thank you. Yeah, I think that once the community realized that those are the only people I talk back to, they're like, okay. And I saw people flip a switch in a week. I remember reading
That's such a good point. You're conditioning the audience to what's going to get a reaction out of you.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think it was an interesting moment where I'm like, I thought I was just part of the community, all of us walking, and then you realize, oh, there's no one in front of me. Oh, I have to lead the pack. I'm a leader of the pack now. What do I do with this? And so I think in that moment, it's a strengthening moment where you can say, oh, I can shape the thing that I'm part of. And so yeah, I
Mm.
still think that Smosh to this day has such an awesome community. It's so positive and I think that it really started just from that mentality and it still kind of goes same way.
I love it. What, when you look back, with Smosh in particular, Ian and Anthony being pioneers in the industry, what is one thing that stands out for you on something that you've taken forward in your career that you learned from them?
Oh, geez, so much. I think humility. I think those guys are as I don't know. I mean, again, they're going to be in history books till the end of time when it comes to internet stuff. And I think even kind of finding this fame really early on in life, right out of high school. I mean, they were still in high school when they found it. I think that they are two like really humble folks that have not really let all of it kind of diminish who they are. And I think that's really something that I carry with a lot of value that I was able to learn by because I think it shaped how I approach any of like the cool things that come from this. And
Mm.
maybe it's also the fact that all of us have had like really crappy jobs. And it's the first piece of advice I ever give to somebody who wants to do this for a living. And most kids these days want to go into content creation, my nephews included. And I'm like, before you ever get into content creation, have really shitty jobs first because you will understand what the baseline is of what you do and don't want to do. And anything that you do in a creative sector, if you get to create your art from a place of like, this is what fuels me and makes my soul happy, then all of it will feel awesome. But you've got to have a baseline of like, whoa, this is what I could be doing.
Well, yeah, because if you don't, you lose perspective,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's kind of like when you see a skateboarding picture and you see somebody in the air, it could be 2 feet in the air, 15 feet in the air, but if you don't see the ground, you have no idea. And so
Yeah,
it's like for the
absolutely.
perspective to be understood, you got to know where that ground is before you're flying high. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So what happened kind of from Smosh? I mean, you're you're in this, right? And it becomes massive. And then
Hmm.
you've started then you rotated to Smosh Games becoming a concept, right? How did Smosh Games even become what it was?
It was the sister channel, I guess the sister channel. At that point, that was the third Smosh channel. And myself, Ian, and Anthony, and three guys from an old channel called Clever Games. These guys are still my best friends in the world to this day. We started the channel, the six of us, as an offshoot of Smosh, and it was just an overnight sort of thing. We were hitting the gaming algorithm that was already made popular by YouTubers PewDiePie and Markiplier at the time, and we were like, what can we do something different with this? And so we brought in, rather than just a single person playing a video game, we brought in an ensemble group, and it was six people, and a lot of the games were as if you were at somebody's house and, you know, playing couch co-op. And so it was more of this feeling of having a small party with a group of your friends and what you can do with it. We brought in a lot of elements of G4 back then, which is a gaming television network, and Jackass. Yeah, it was with the Jackass part of it, we kind of made famous like if you lose if you lose a game, then you get punished. And so these punishments got more and more Jackass style, but yeah, it was our kind of blend of comedy from the time.
I mean, that was kind of in the early days, really, right? With video game streaming
Yeah,
as a concept, I think.
it was still very, very early on. And what sold me was like, wait, I can get video games for free? And I remember like a year in, they're like, you guys might get PlayStations for free. I'm like, I'm on board for the rest of my life. I get a free PlayStation. This is bananas. Um, so yeah, and little by little, it started becoming like, oh, Nintendo wants to work with you. Microsoft wants to work with you. And I'm like, these are companies that, you know, we grew up with, and they were just, they shaped some of our childhoods, and
Yeah, I mean,
to be able to
most of
work with
us.
them directly.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy, right?
I think that the possibilities of what digital content creation can be and how it was seen, I was seeing in real time how it was changing the way people approach it, how people talk about it, how companies see it. And lo and behold, I had no idea that I again would be in this like pioneering position, because there were no female gamers that were, you know, at the Smosh level, and I was part of that. So
What were some of your favorite? Well, how long were you at Smosh before
10
you?
years.
10 years.
Yeah,
What
I left in 2020.
2020? What were some of your favorite, stories, kind of favorite memories from the experience there over the 10 years?
Oh gosh. You know, the I think the if this were a different interview, I would talk about all the big stuff. You know, the things where it's like, well, we played a video game that took place in ancient Egypt, so we went to Egypt and did all the stuff in video games in real life. I mean, those are the big things
Yeah.
that look awesome in a portfolio and stuff like that. But honestly, it's the little stuff. It was the day-to-day being in the office, being around a lot of creatives every single day. It was the type of office where I would be the first one in and the last one out by choice. Um, it was the small conversations that kept people in a really creative state, just throwing a lot of ideas out there, and sometimes one sticking and it being like really, really good. But it came out of just being in a space where you can just kind of talk about the ideas in your head. And I think that was the most valuable time for me.
Oh, that's awesome. It's wild because at this point, this is your career, right? I mean, this is your
Yeah.
career, right? At what point did you realize that this is kind of the essence of you? You know what I mean? Like you were drawn towards something different than what you experienced in your childhood, and then eventually you're into it. And
Hmm.
then when did you realize this is my lane and
Hmm.
I'm good at this and I'm going to own this and I'm going to nurture it?
It's such a good question. It took a while. It took a while because ballet wasn't just the thing that I did, it was my entire personality for all of my life at that point. It was the thing that was an absolute pillar. And I had a very hard time of understanding what it meant to let that go and slide in a different pillar until I realized I could have just both of them at the same time. I'm like, oh, I don't know why I have to self sabotage one for the other one. But I think it's, it's the thought process of you have to be the one thing. And I grew up with that notion. And maybe it's a very old school thought and a thought that is being a little bit kind of blended away these days. But my parents are from the generation of like, you do one thing in your life, you get really good at it, you make it your job, and then you retire.
Yeah.
And so that was ballet for me. And I was telling myself, I put so much into this and I can make a living out of it, starving artist, but I can still make make a living out of it. And I'm going to let it go for this question mark of a career. It felt just like something that I couldn't wrap my head around. So for 2.5 years after I started Smosh, I was still dancing and making content. I just couldn't let go of the fact that like, what if I mess up by saying goodbye to this pillar in my life? So for 2.5 years, it was like all the numbers were saying this is a job.
Yep. I mean, that makes
The
sense.
revenue was saying this is a
Yeah.
job. More than it was paying more than what I was making in a year for dancing, and yet it was still like, I think there was a lot of ego built into it too. In a strange way, ballet felt like this pretentious thing to be able to say like, oh, I'm classically trained. And YouTube felt like this thing of like, oh, I'm a rogue and I just kind of roam around and make stuff that I want. And I think I had a hard time marrying the two because they were just such, in my head, polar opposites. One was just like being like I don't know, like a wanderer and a cowboy. And then the other one was like this refined ballerina. And I'm like, I don't know which one I am anymore. And so
Yeah.
I struggled for a very long time to figure out which one I am. And to this day, I realize that I'm still both.
There's both. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's a way to be rebellious and kind of like go against the norm and go against the grain and still having technique and um, a lot of intent and studying up for it. And then also kind of, I don't know, staying aloof and kind of loose about the whole thing too. So it is that dichotomy is something that I'm always kind of playing around with. And in my lowest parts, I'm like, oh, I wish I could just be one. It's just so much easier to be like, I am this personality rather than like, oh, these two polar opposites? That's me.
What it's so inspiring, I think, for people. I think a lot of people are in or have been in this spot where you're trying to figure these things out. What advice would you have for people that are trying to figure out how to really find their path and their lane and their direction?
I think right now, because of the way digital content creation, all of this looks, it's so outward in the sense of like, how many numbers do you have? How many viewers and subscribers and followers? It's so outward. And it's really easy to see the outward projection of things and try to make that your goals and your markers. But I think because of that, it is so much more important to look inward because none of the outside stuff will matter if the inside is just rotting. I think that I know for myself, my like 2% factor that I put in every day is really taking care of myself. And it took a long time for me to understand that what I had always been doing was taking care of myself, my instrument, because if that's not showing up, then it's not good for myself. It's not good for anyone else either.
It's such good advice. What's an example of how you take care of yourself?
Yeah, I would say exercise, and a lot of this will be like, yeah, I knew that. But like, I think carving out time to exercise, it used to be the norm for me. And then I was like, oh, I can just focus on the fun stuff. And then it started taking a toll on my mental health. So exercise is a pillar, eating healthy is a pillar, and mental health and therapy is the other. And all the spa treatments and stuff like that, those are all the good stuff too. It's like, yeah, I think I struggled for a time period of like, oh, this feels like really self-centered to put myself first and to take care of myself. But I realize that I am a much better person for everyone else when I am taking care of myself. And ballet did teach me a lot of that. I think it taught me that getting enough sleep and rest and eating well and taking care of my body is the only way to be able to get up and break all of that down so I can repair it again. It was a constant sort of rinse and repeat of doing everything I can to healthy myself up so I can break it all the way down so I can
Yeah.
get back up to here again. And it was like an everyday sort of thing.
Yeah. It makes so much sense. Like a professional athlete's mindset in terms of, breaking that muscle down and then repairing it so that you can get back and do it again and be productive. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
You transitioned. I just knowing your story, I'd have to imagine the move from Smosh to breaking out and doing your own thing. Talk to us about that.
Oh, it was so scary.
I bet.
It was really, debilitating for a couple of months, maybe a few months, because it felt like almost like like I had to grieve. I was part of a collective for 10 years. And then I'm like, I'm going to go fly on my own. And then I'm starting to flap my wings and it's starting to get really, really scary out there is what it felt like. But at the same time, I realized that all of the little things that I had done for so long in my career with Smosh not gonna go anywhere. It's gonna carry through. And talk about a little thing that I used to do at Smosh that became a big thing is I because of our schedule, we were 9 to 5, 5 days a week, like any other um uh I would say a regular job, but I think a lot of YouTubers do not approach it that way.
Sure. Yeah.
We would go into an office 9 to 5. And so a lot of the times, if we weren't filming on days, a lot of the days would be kind of like creative consulting and stuff like that. I found pockets of time to just send out 5 emails a day to just cold emails being like, hello, I like your stuff. If you ever want to work together, I'm around. And so I got really good with just cold emailing a lot of folks. And I realized that as soon as I started my own thing outside of Smosh, all of those conversations, not every single conversation, it was like one in every 15 maybe.
Yeah.
A lot of those conversations carried through and saying like, hey, I remember your email from way back when. I'm working at this other place now and I can hire people.
Wow. So that all
And
came
so
that all came back.
oh yeah, in the coolest way because of course it makes sense. Somebody who is a social media manager 1 year might be, doing partnerships 3 years from now. And so it goes back to just kind of putting yourself out there again and being nice. You
Yeah.
never know.
Staying in
Yeah.
touch, making contacts, networking, and then all those people through the years are up leveling their careers, right? They
Yeah.
started as a, individual contributor at this level. Now they're a manager of this and managing partnerships. Now they get budget. They remember you, and here you go.
Yeah. And it was the quiet little work, and it's like sending out emails, most of them kind of disappearing into the ether. I think it is a lesson that I need to like reintroduce myself with as well of like, oh my gosh, it's the little stuff that you just don't know if there's going to be an end factor. And I think we talked a little bit about atomic habits, but it is like getting rid of that goalpost, isn't it? It's about
Yeah.
doing the little things that stack up, and that's just kind of more of like the compounding interest. Oh, well, here I go having a existential crisis on your show.
Well, listen, this is the perfect show to do it on because it's all about the little things that make the big difference. You said something to me that has stuck with me, and I loved it. You said it's about the boring things. It's the boring things that created the path to success for you, and it's
Oh, yeah.
such a good comment.
It's especially when you are an entertainer, people think that it's all just the fun stuff and all of the hyperbolic parts of an entertainer's life. And I think YouTube and social media, whether it's just an Instagram person or a streamer, whatever it is, like, I think it's easy for people to put that as the bar, as like that's the regular day. I mean, I remember my nephews being like, I want to be a YouTuber. And I'm like, why? They're like, oh, because I want to just roll out of bed at 2 p.m. and just make a video and just do whatever I want. I'm like, oh,
That's
my
their
gosh,
perception of
only you.
what life is like, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that for most YouTubers, and I don't know, nowadays it could be different, but for most YouTubers and especially old school YouTubers, a lot of it is just running your own business and all the administrative work that comes with that. The plugging in and plugging out of like hiring and not hiring and just all of the insecurities that come from running your own business. It's all part of it. And I think that I learned that the boring stuff stacks up from ballet. And it all goes back to this like tug and pull of like, what was ballet in my life? Was it a hindrance, or was it the thing that built me into the person I am? But I remember having a master ballet teacher come in and teach us, talking about the importance of a plie, and that really stuck with me. And I kept kind of like
what's a plie?
thinking about it. So plie is probably the easiest ballet step that you can think of. It's putting your feet together and bending your knees.
Okay.
Bending your knees, straightening it up, bending your knees. And it's one of the first things that you learn as a ballerina, and it is the thing that you never master. It's simple, but it's not easy. And I think that I have taken that in little bits and pieces throughout my whole life, where just because something looks simple, and a 2-year-old can do a bend your knee and straighten your knee, and a 90-year-old can do a bend your knee and straighten your knee, but how you do it, the integrity, the approach to it is what makes all the difference. And I think that understanding that there is no ending to how much mastery you can put into an easy step has been something that has really stuck in my head. I can't say that I approach everything that way, but I like to think that it's kind of rattling in there somewhere.
So you apply the plie from ballet to your career now.
Yeah. I approach it in a way where, just because something looks like it is simple and it's a task that anyone can do, it does not mean that it is going to be an easy approach. But I don't know. I think with enough time and the understanding that it is kind of like a thing that you can keep chipping away at, and a thing that you can keep working on, the end goal doesn't have to mean that you have achieved the thing. It's more so of like knowing that every time you approach it, it can be better.
Yeah, it's the journey. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. So tell us what you're doing now between YouTube and streaming and Twitch. Like, how are you spending your time? What are your focus projects now?
Yeah. So YouTube has kind of bled into hosting for either network television or streamers. And so I've worked a lot with like Paramount Plus and Netflix, and folks like that were, gosh, unexpected. Can you imagine a YouTuber who learned how to use a teleprompter from a homemade teleprompter? Is doing hosting work. So yeah, if I'm not doing YouTube, I'm doing hosting work. If I'm not doing hosting work, then I am continuing with my acting career, which is martial arts, cinematic martial arts, and kind of staying on the horizon with like educating myself and all that stuff. I really have always wanted to be an actor, but it's always scared me because I don't want to just approach it as like, I just want to be in movies. Like, I really want to learn the craft. So it was important for me to take the same approach as ballet, where I'm like, I want to earn my stripes. I want to know that I've gone through schooling to end up in audition rooms. And not everyone has to take this approach. It's my own sort of understanding of like, that's how I gain confidence when enough people have been like scrutinizing my work to make it better. That's how I know I have confidence in what I do. And I think that's kind of how I grew up with ballet. There was always this feedback loop of like, okay, I did the thing. How was it? Oh, okay. I can
Yeah.
improve a little bit. Okay. I did the thing again. How can I improve now? How can I improve now? So I approach acting the same way. So I'm constantly in classes and, yeah, I finished the method school last year and I'm in a VO sort of camp now. So
Okay. Wow. So this is, well, it's interesting, right? Because it connects, you've always been in performance, your whole life. I didn't know that about you, that you had that dream to, move into, you've obviously been in acting, but continue to nurture that part of your career.
yeah, acting for me was kind of like the thing where, when you're a kid, somebody says, what do you want to be? And you say, astronaut, firefighter, actor. And then as you grow older, you're like, that was a cute dream. Until I realized, like, oh, I'm allowed to go for something that is so big in my own mind that I may never achieve it, but I really, really enjoy the process of it. And I'm in a position where I've been able to just fund my own short films. I'm like, okay, I am YouTube taught me that I don't need to wait on somebody else's time to get the thing that I want to get done. I always wanted to do video games in real life, and I got to do a bunch of that on Smosh. I wasn't waiting for a network to be like, we will buy your show and you can make the thing. We just did it. And so YouTube has been a way for me to just say, hey, I'm gathering some folks that can make short films with me, and I want to do action stuff, and we're going to just do it. And so it's been a really fun way for me to have that outlet without feeling like I'm wasting away until someone gives me a chance. I'm just taking it.
Your whole career has a theme around around you choosing to take some chances, take some risks, and put yourself out there on the things that are interesting to you. So it makes all the sense in the world that you would self-produce and create the team and put yourself out there.
It's definitely a little bit of both. I'm still dipping into both, where it's just like, screw the man, I'm doing it by myself. And then the other side where I'm like, but I am very studious and I'm learning how to do it the correct way as well. I can't let go of those two halves of me. And as much as they are contrasting to each other, I think that it is exactly what has helped me tick. I'm kind of
Yeah.
like I don't know, I'm an introspective idiot where it's like what I put out there is just fun and silly and humorous and I don't know, it's outlandish and big and boisterous. And on the other side, I am just a introverted like nerd who needs to understand the intricacies of little things. So
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I love it. Is Twitch and that whole streaming part of your life as big a part of your life as it was a couple years ago? And is it going to continue to be a big part of your life? What's the direction there?
Which was kind of my way of figuring out what the heck to do with myself during the pandemic. I started streaming during the pandemic, and it was my way of kind of staying in tune with the rest of my community during this time and trying to figure out exactly how to conduct myself during the whole thing. And so I grew a really large audience during that period when it was my main focus. I also had like a show on Quibi, and that was kind of the thing. Rest in peace, Quibi. That was also kind of my outlet during that time. But Nowadays, I see streaming as a way for me to say hi to my community, but nothing where I am looking at it as like it was never really kind of a machine that I saw as a way to either, be a pillar of like how to make money or anything like that. It was more so of a way for me to be like being able to hop on a really big Zoom call, basically. Where, strangely enough, I'm the only person talking, but I could still kind of see what the community is up to and stay in contact in that way.
Got it. Well, there's so many people out there, like you said, family members for you, for me, that want to move into streaming.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for people that would want to choose that as a career path?
I would say have a different career before you make it a career path. I think that it is still a place where it can make a superstar in a day, or it'll take 5, 6 years. And there is no telling how that'll happen. Other than I think being really, really smart about it and luck, and luck is kind of like luck of the draw of the algorithm. But I think there are ways to make a real smart effort as well. Um, and I think that if anything, it is okay once you get your bright shining day of having all the eyes on you. How do you maintain that so that you're not just a blip that happens for a day? What is it that is going to continue for you to do this for another year or 10 years? I think that's where everything that you talk about on this show comes forth, right?
Yeah.
It's the small everyday stuff that is going to stack up to help you have a long career in this as opposed to a short one. I did not know that I'd be doing this for now 13 years. Every year that went by, I'm like, well, this has got to be it, right? This is the last year. Oh, surely somebody is going to come knocking on my door being like, hey, go get a real job. This isn't a job. Go get out of here. Get out of here. And so every year I am like, oh my gosh, I'm still doing this. But I know that there's a reason why I'm doing this. I'm good at what I do. I'm professional. I show up to things and I'm nice to people. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the little things.
That's super advice for people that are interested in becoming content creators, right? It's how do you create that sticky. It's one thing to be a flash in the pan, right? It's another thing to how do you create that sustainable, continued path of content creation and contribution and value in order to create a sustainable audience for the future.
Because you gotta like what you're doing, man. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm glad that I didn't out of the gate come out with stuff where I'm like, I just didn't enjoy myself. If it's something that you can talk about for a very long time, if you're also good at it, if you're interested in it, if it's capable of like churning out, 25 ideas off the bat and then more and more, it's gonna only help you. But if you're into something that might be a one big idea, then
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's
get
hard.
it. I can imagine, having these conversations if I wasn't a nerd in terms of into trying to
Yeah.
figure these things out. It's really interesting to hear from you, your path and the things that you've learned. I am curious about now that you're doing your own thing, when you compare and contrast that to working, with one of the biggest YouTube, channels ever, and creator groups that were out there. What are kind of the pros and cons of that experience?
I think working at Smosh was as close as you can possibly get to being classically trained on YouTube. Like I don't know if there are other opportunities where you go 9 to 5, 5 days a week plus. I mean, we were there like 10 hours a day and we would hang out probably 7 days a week, because we were friends outside of just the channel. So I don't know if there would have been any other sort of opportunity for me to learn that much in such little time. And this was a group that hired, folks to do thumbnails at that point, folks to look at algorithms and analytics and we could learn from those folks. And I think I learned the ragtagness of YouTube as well as the traditional production side of things too. Like I can make a call sheet and I can just take a camera and go vlog. Like there's again those two sides, those dichotomous sides of like what you see on YouTube is this it looks real janky sometimes and ragtag, like anyone can do it. But on the other side of it, on the underneath side of it, it is a professional set. Everyone is, everyone's got a call sheet. Everyone showed up on time. There's lunch provided. People are taking care of like understanding how many hours are being worked. Like there's such an underbelly to things that what you see again on the outside is not always indicative of what's on the inside. So it goes back to you got to have both.
I love
You
it.
got to know
It makes
both.
so much sense. You're absolutely right that you almost got, when I hear you talk about this, you got your bachelor's, your master's, and your doctorate through that experience and that combination. I mean, it's really what I hear when I hear you talk about it what you what you put into it and the way that you went in mindset wise in order to learn the combination of the business skills and the organizational skills around making it successful, and also like you said, the creative ragtag, all those things put you in a spot to be the entrepreneur you are now also.
Mm.
So tell me about space station gaming and how that's going and what your approach has been to that.
The space station was my foray into esports. And I, although watched esports, I've never been in esports. And they are, gosh, they're good at what they do. Holy moly. I learned so much from being a part of Space Station. I'm so grateful to be a part of them. Yeah, so we are in esports, competitive gaming, Halo, Rocket League, and a few other games. And I think what I get from it is learning what it's like to be in this for a long time and still have a grassroots approach. And for me, I struggle with, wanting to be really like careful about things and structured and rehearsed and perfect. And then Space Station is always there to remind me from like a very skateboarding culture perspective of we're going to break some stuff. We're going to get kind of scratched up. We're going to try stuff. It's always going to have some flavor and some sauce to it, but it's going to be fun. And I think it's such a fresh approach to esports that I am constantly learning and constantly enamored by the team. It's so cool. I get very animated talking about Space Station Gaming because I'm very excited about it. But totally biasedly, I think we approach esports in a very different way, and I love being part of the community.
Where are you guys taking it? What's the long-term vision with space station gaming?
Long-term vision is really continuing to be a part of the community. If community is number one for us,
Okay.
whatever game we're in, whatever happens, within like the esports sort of economy and whatnot, the community is number one. And so that's really where we put our the eggs. That's where the
Yeah.
eggs are.
It's where you put your energy, right? Put your energy into what you want to grow, the community.
Yeah, because it's all about the experience that you take away. And just a couple of weeks ago, we were the ones who essentially threw a big party. It was the Halo Global Invitational, but we were given the okay from the company that makes Halo 343 to put on this competition in Utah, which is where Space Station Gaming is from. And so it was essentially, here's a big party. It'll be Halo esports. All these teams are flying in from everywhere, and we're going to do it our own way. And I think esports has become a thing where in some ways, it's become a little bit corporate, right? There's a cookie cutter way of doing things because it's how it's been approached for so long and it's worked. But we're like, it's our party. We want to do it our way. And so it was so different. People who have been playing Halo for a decade plus have gone to every single tournament there is, are like, we've never seen anything like this before.
What makes it different? How are you guys? Because what I hear you saying is you're trying to disrupt, right? Which you've done, if you think about it, like you've done in several different areas you've touched. Like how are you guys being disruptors in this?
With Halo, it was community and art. I think those are the things that really, really, really made it different. For the art part, we made all these neon posters that were almost as if you were being indoctrinated into the Halo world. Like, we need soldiers to be with Master Chief, and all these things that kind of made you feel like you were part of the world, not just going to an event that was put on by Halo, but you were in the Halo world. And so from a visual standpoint, it looked like this run down like city street where you're just a citizen in the world. And yeah, you're kind of you're like, oh my gosh, do I go fight for the cause type of thing. And so I think it felt different
Yeah.
visually. And then from a community aspect, most of it was free. We were just like, if you're in the area and you wanna come see what esports is like, come on in, and hopefully you'll have a good time. The experience is fun. You can play some games if you want. You can look at cool things. You can look at a 15-foot Master Chief. Maybe it wasn't that big. Maybe it was like 7 feet. Yeah, it was probably 7 feet, but in my head it was 15 feet. So yeah, it was more kind of just getting the community excited about esports without being gatekeepers of it.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. One thing I've been wanting to ask you is what would you say to women, right? All ages, right? Whether they're young women or women transitioning their careers that want to get into content creation.
Oh yeah. I think that it is a way for you to be able to tell your story your way. And, I mean, I think that society has been oppressive for women forever. And it's also been really trash for men too for a long time. Like, it's been trash for everyone for a long, long time. But like, social media allows you to tell your story your way, and there aren't, managers and things like that. Like, if you're trying to compare it to Hollywood and actors, like there are other ways to be able to tell your story from a personal perspective. And so I think there's a lot of power in that. I think that for women in this space, it's important to be able to carry your own voice without being a token, and putting yourself in a position where you are more than just a checkbox. And I think a lot of people feel like they can be a checkbox these days, because everybody, I don't know, has a list and wants all these checkboxes checked. But
Right.
we are all more than just kind of something to be filled out on a piece of paper that looks good for somebody else to be like, hey, look at the thing that I did.
Right.
Yeah, I think that there's ways to be able to uplift your voice and things like that in your own way, so that when you are put in that position, you've really carried it the whole way. You've
Yeah.
like earned that position. It feels really, really good.
It's empowering,
Um,
right?
yeah, and I think that those pathways are little by little being etched out, of like, it's got to be done this way or that way. I also think that it's great conversation starters for what is still missing in this world, and you can do it your own way. Um, yeah, I think social media can be a powerful tool, and at the same time, also keep your armor on. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of voices out there, so it's easy to get swayed one way or another. And this is self-talk from myself as well. When you see something really hitting big on social media, you think that you have to also do the thing, but I don't know, stay in your own lane, and most of the time it'll feel a lot better that way. Whether
Yeah.
you have 1,000 followers or 10 million followers, I think as long as if you know that you got there your own way, that's the sustainable way.
What I love about your message too is we have a lot of listeners that are in different countries, and it's a global message, right? Because depending on where you live, if you can find a opportunity to have a voice and create content, on one of these platforms, whether it's YouTube or Twitch or anything else that's out there, it is an opportunity to change your life, right?
Hmm.
And those some of those vehicles just weren't around years ago. So I think you are inspiring to so many people that have, an eye on what you're doing and are watching and have seen how your career has evolved and where you came from in a full 180 degrees difference in ballet into transforming into content creation and all the different things that you do. It's a very inspiring story for women. So, and for all people, that are looking to grow and learn and create their path. So I appreciate you.
For sure. Thank you. I do have one thing to say about being a woman in the space. If you think that it is the thing that will hinder you, is the opposite. Because in ballet, it is a lot of women in the space and a few men. And those few men get paid really, really well because there's not a lot of them. And that is the exact mentality I took when I got into gaming, where I'm like, oh, there's a lot of dudes out here. It's not a lot of women. Oh, I'm going to get paid. So it's like you can see the thing that is usually in headlines seen as like you're the other for that reason. Let it empower you, like take it and spin it on its head because you absolutely can.
Well, that's a great message. We ask Mari, every guest, we always ask this question. I'm interested to hear what yours is. And the question is, when you review kind of where you are now and all the different things you've learned and what your plan is for the future, if you could go back and talk to your 22-year-old self, what would you say?
Oh man, I would say you're just getting started, buddy. Ooh wee. I think at 22, I thought I knew what my life would look like. And in a lot of ways, I was settling into what made the most sense, what was the most appropriate societally, what kind of always was written into existence as like, at this point, you should finish college. At this point, you should be married. At this point, you should have kids. At this point, you should retire. And those pillars are all over the place now, and I am happy as ever. I think that I didn't realize how much more life there is to live, and I think that that can be said at any age. Holy moly. I think that just getting started, all of us.
That's great advice. Great advice. Is there anything, Mari, that you would like to promote?
I'm at AtomicMari on all socials, and whether it's looking at sociological problems and good things and bad things about I got a channel about that. Video games and gaming content, I got a channel for that. Otherwise, my daily sort of life sort of things on my socials.
I just have to tell you, I thought today's conversation was amazing. So
Oh,
thank you for
thanks.
sharing, for opening up, for being vulnerable, for helping people understand your real journey and the untold story that is around your success and the 2% factor moments that have shaped how you got to where you are and where you're going. I wish you all the success in the world. Thank you so much for joining. Um, really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for the conversation. I'm going to go take some notes now. I'm like, I got to do this now.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please like and subscribe and listen again at future episodes on how to hear what the small things that people chose to do along their journey and what their 2% factors were as they created their story for success. Thank you.